I saw somewhere that you opened the PR about debugging Buildpacks. Uh,
Oh, yes. An RFC.
yes, RFC, yeah, sorry. Not.
Yeah, yeah. All right, let's just put that as the th designate note taker policy.
Ah, yeah, we have to.
New faces. Any new faces? No. None. Review
Yeah.
outstanding RFCs. We don't have to do that because I'm not doing it because like neither of us can make any decisions on them anyway. So what's the point? CNB updates and questions. We can do that bit, and that's where this bit comes in. RFC for phase debug script. Aussie. Hey, we got a third person. Yay!
Sorry.
Oh
Hello.
yeah. How's things?
Oh, busy, busy. I'm sure you know the feeling.
Yep. Let me fill in everybody else. I got your name from a previous one. We can just stick that in as well.
Sweet.
Yeah, we've skipped past the review outstanding RFCs because we figured there wasn't going to be anybody else here who could review them or know what to do if we did. So I was just going to give a quick update on the RFC that I raised. Oh, where are you? 326. Yep. So at the as a result of some of the stuff that I was doing for the Snowdrop build pack platform implementation, I'd added a capability to let me debug phases bit by bit. And in discussion with the guys over in Cloud Native build packs, they're like, yeah, that might actually be quite useful. So I've raised that as an RFC against pack CLI to add the capability. I mean, in a nutshell, it's the capability to specify a script when running a build such that that script will be driven instead of the relevant lifecycle binary for every phase, and the path to the lifecycle binary and the arguments for the lifecycle binary will be passed to that script as arguments. This lets you write a script that acts as a wrapper for the lifecycle execution so that you can do things like, I don't know, dump the state of the layers file system and see what the permissions are and ownership of it. Or you can take a look at what the content of analyze.toml is and see whether it still reflects what you think it does. And it's massively valuable to do. I'm surprised we never got around to doing anything like that in the past, but yeah, it's one of those things that you generally only start running into problems with as a platform developer or somebody doing things beyond what a normal build pack does. You know, when you're running in environments where this should work, it just doesn't, and it's because something's gone wrong. This lets you debug it. So that was the proposal. I've had some good feedback in the sense that Natalie replied and said, yes, we totally need something like this. This will be amazing. Um, and commented saying that we've got something like it where you run it in interactive mode so you can see what it's doing step by step, but this is infinitely more flexible and more dangerous, obviously, because you can do whatever you want within a script that's run with in the context of the container whenever the lifecycle is about to be driven. But yeah, it solved my problems endless times when I was developing the platform for me. So I'm sure it'll be useful for other people. It's also quite useful debugging multi-arch image problems as well, because that's where I learned that the SHA hash for the platform specific image is not the same as the SHA hash for the multi-platform entry which is already in the local Docker daemon. That was the problem that I hit there. If you've not met that, that's when you have multi-arch run images, and you're running locally in a daemon-based build on platforms 10 and 11. Then it doesn't matter if the platform pulls the run image by name to get the latest one down or whatever, the hash that it will get is for the multi-platform entry, and that's what it stores the platform specific image under in your local Docker daemon. Now, this sounds quite twisted, right? Because an image should be known by one SHA hash, ideally. But it seems that once you get into multi-arch, when you're looking at it locally from a Docker perspective, if you do an image pull against the multi-platform name, so that it's just, not platform specific as a name, then it will get the platform specific version for the platform that you're running on, but will store it in your Docker daemon under the hash of the multi-platform entry.
Oh, so practically you have uh, the digest is only for one image instead of for the multi.
Exactly. You end up with the image stored under the digest SHA for the multi-platform, but the content you have locally is the appropriate one for your platform. This causes problems in Buildpacks 0.10, 0.11 because at some point when it realizes that it's gone multi-platform for the run image, it will update the SHA hash in the analyze.toml to say you should be using this specific platform SHA hash because it goes off to the registry directly, retrieves the actual the manifest, and then gets the platform specific SHA and says this is the one that you must use when we do the export phase for the run image. And of course, you don't have that entry in your local Docker daemon under that hash because you have it under the multi-platform hash, and therefore the build fails. That was what I learned while developing this. It's an edge case because it only applies when you've got multi-platform run images and you're doing daemon-based builds, possibly only when extensions are in play as well. But either way, you avoid it by updating your platform to reread analyze toml just before the export phase and re-pull the image that it thinks it's going to use for the run image. Because if you actually then do a pull against the platform specific SHA, it will quite happily go and get the image again. And then you have two images in your Docker registry locally, or Docker daemon locally, that have different hashes but the same content, which is even more fun. But we won't get into the problems you end up with there. So I presume they're based on the same layers because on the file system, because the layers are based on layer hashes and they'll match. So
you said this happens only when you use Docker daemon for building
it's only when you use a daemon build.
What does it mean? Like we use it.
What's that mean? It means when we mount the Docker daemon into the containers and pass minus daemon to the lifecycle phases. That's the lowest technical description. From a top level perspective, you can think of it as Buildpack builds via the lifecycle can run in one of two modes: registry mode or daemon mode. When they're running in daemon mode, the life cycle itself will talk to the daemon that's inside the container in order to do things like pulling images or whatever else it needs to get done. In registry mode, it doesn't have a daemon inside the container at all, and it talks directly to the remote registry. So when it does things like exporting, it's creating layers in the remote registry directly rather than creating them in a local Docker daemon. The net effect of the two is if you build in daemon mode, the resulting image is accessible to your Docker daemon at the end, and it's up to you to push it somewhere if it needs to go there. Unless you did minus publish, in which case it did that anyway. But if you run it in registry mode, your image won't be in your Docker daemon at the end because it didn't put it there. Your image will only exist in the remote registry, and you have to pull it back. So if you want to use it again locally, right?
So it's a best practice at least to when we build, like at least for the pipelines, to always use the registry.
Registry mode makes a lot more sense for
public.
pipelines. Yeah, absolutely. Because pipelines, you don't really want to go mounting Docker daemons into containers on pipelines. I can imagine a few security things will trip if you try doing that. I mean, that's not to say that we aren't going to have trouble with pipelines anyway, because we've got to run the pipelines in with the right levels of privileges. And when you get to the extender phase, that generally means running the extender phase as root so that it can run the Docker extensions in the right way. But I think somebody was saying I think it might have been Charles who was talking about having issues with a thing that he was doing where he said, "Oh, I fixed it. I just set the container to privileged." I'm like, "Ouch." That's a bit of a big hammer to crack a small nut there. But given that we're only in prototyping, that's fine. Later, we'll need to fix that. I mean, I know that both Pack and my platform set security context, whatever it is, the SE Linux permissions. We disable that for the containers where we run certain phases. Because SE Linux will just get in the way and yell every single time the extender does anything. So it's just not worth leaving it turned on at that point.
Yeah, is this something that happened using the latest version of the lifecycle?
Oh, this has been happening ever since. This would happen with any version of the lifecycle from 0.10 to 0.11 when doing a daemon-based build where the run images are multi-platform.
Okay, because I have let's do this.
Anything after 0.11, so 0.12, 13, I think 14's out now, of the platform spec, doesn't have this issue anymore because it passes an extra flag to the relevant phases that's called minus registry. I think, one of those. Anyway, there's an extra flag that's passed that means that because the problem is that you'd like to think that you could run a build without it reaching out to anything external. Certainly, if you're running a build where you've already pulled all the images onto your daemon, you're running a daemon-based build, it should never need to go out and talk to anywhere else in an isolated environment. But platforms 0.10 and 11, and to a certain extent later if it gets into the wrong state, will do this, because when it gets to the multi-platform part, when it realizes the image is multi-platform, it reaches out directly to the remote registry to get the manifest for that multi-platform run image, which violates the whole concept of this being an isolated build. Because it's when it gets the manifest from the registry remotely, then it knows the SHA hash for the run image it's going to use. And that problem goes away once you get up past platform 0.12, because a new flag's added that allows it to refer to the run image that's in your daemon via a daemon reference rather than via a registry reference.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think maybe I understand why they would have done this, because if like you were building the same app locally once on one architecture and once on another, and you pull the image, it's gonna use the same tag, like your local Docker daemon. So like we do multi-arch builds, but the way we build multi-arch containers is we have like a different runner that's for each build, and then we just push those images and then combine them afterwards. So I've never actually tried to. Yeah, we avoid the problem, but we don't use extensions. So like, and we're using an old version of a lifecycle version. I'm not sure exactly how old, but we're using version 20.7. So we haven't hit this issue yet. But it's good to keep in mind for us.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of it.
What was the other bit? Something else crossed my mind while we were talking about all that. That's CNCF level. So we got completely off topic, because that was the phase debug script, and I'll put in some discussion. Yeah, I'm sure there was something else that came up in my mind about that. Never mind, it's gone.
I wanted to ask, you might remember. So to ask for the debug RFC, like,
That's it.
who's going to implement it? Is it going to implement it soon, or do you have an implementation that it might be, we might be able to use it? Or I mean, I'm also interested. Because I was searching it, I searched it a little bit at the past, but it was very difficult for me to put the debugger, because I don't know how all these internal things work. So, I mean, yeah, if we can get involved into this one, or if it's something there that we can use, I think that would be.
I mean, platform-wise, it's not too much of a problem, because Pack now has code in it that pulls the image an extra time just before the export phase. My library also has code in it that pulls the image an extra time just before the export phase. I think the biggest challenge may be, and I wish there was somebody here from the affected company so we could pass this on, might be the Spring Boot plugin. Because the Spring Boot plugin is rapidly aging. Let's put it that way. Its platform level support is still claiming. They wrote it so that it doesn't claim a bound for its platform level support. And so it claims to support platforms 0.4 and to infinity. It doesn't. The order of analyze and detect inverted at platform level 0.7. And Spring Boot never inverts the platform ordering. And in fact, it's applying the 0.7 order to all builds, regardless of what platform level the builder asks for. So, yeah, there are issues with the Spring Boot plugin at this point being incompatible with existing builders. It doesn't have any additional image pools in there, so it's going to struggle if it sets into a state where it's running a build and it hits a multi-platform run image in the situations that I'm describing. Now, whether that's likely is a very different question. The third part is it still doesn't support extensions. So you cannot build a Spring Boot app via the UBI builder at the moment, and never will be able to unless they update their plugin to actually, I don't know, follow any of the specs that have appeared since 0.7 would be nice. I mean, that's about 3 years worth of updates that they haven't made. So um, at that point, you start to question, well, how prevalent are build packs going to be if the main way that most Java ecosystem people are driving these is stagnant and not receiving updates?
Yeah, I was going to ask, I've never used that because we build our own stuff internally, but do they use Paketo's build packs for the Java runtime? Okay.
Yep. So Spring Boot specifies Paketo's builders as their defaults. They do allow you to customize it and pass in other builders as well. Yeah, you can cast. It's a fully fledged Java implementation of the build pack spec. It's just frozen in time about 3 years ago. Um, I mention all of this a lot because I'm maintaining the equivalent, and full disclosure, I'm maintaining that because it goes into Quarkus. So Quarkus now supports all of the different builders, all the different spec levels, and is tested against them and runs against them as well as it can do, really. And the Spring one, well, doesn't. So it would be nice if it did, because A, they can claim they're actually supporting build packs in a better way than they are now, and then B, it means that we could build a Spring app and put it on a UBI um, platform for support reasons.
Yeah, all good points.
Yeah. So the last part that I remembered and made a mental note into the list there was Canico. Um, so for those of you who are or aren't aware, the way that extensions work within CNCF build packs is that instead of running a build phase, we run a extender phase. And then the extender binary basically does the equivalent of driving the generate scripts for all of the extensions that have been opted in. Yeah, because we've still got extensions, you've got build packs. They both have detect. Detect says whether or not they want to be involved. The lifecycle decides whether they will be involved, picking only from the people who wanted to be, but not necessarily picking all of them. Once the build plan has been decided, which lists which extensions and which build packs shall be involved, then we go over to the extender. The extender then goes to run the generate step of each extension that's involved. Generate is the equivalent of build from a build pack. Yeah, if you've got detect and build, then extensions have detect and generate. The generate step of an extension can output Docker files, either dockerfile.run or dockerfile.build, or just, I think if you just do a Docker file, it'll apply to both. Anyway, the point is you're outputting a Docker file from your extension that will be applied against either the build or the run image, depending on which the content you've set it up to be. So the generate phases are all run, so you end up with a directory full of Docker files that need to be applied and an order that you should execute those in. And then the extender goes on to use Canico to apply those Docker files to, well, first off, the builder image. And as you know, you're running this thing in the context of a container that's built from the builder image. When you're running the extender, it's you ran it from the image, the builder image. So basically, what you're doing is the output of all of the extensions, the dockerfile.builds, is applied on top of the image that your current container is currently based on. And then Canico does a magic trick where it reestablishes the execution thread into the context of the extended container. Yeah, it's a good trick. So basically, you apply a crap. No, I'm not going to use that language. But if you apply a load of Docker files to your running build image, and then you go in, like chroot, or step inside this thing, and now magically you have access to all of the packages that those Docker files installed, if that's what they did, sort of thing, which is great. And that's exactly what we're doing from UBI, all the rest of it, because our extensions output a Docker file. The Docker file says to do the equivalent of RPM install Java or RPM install Node, and then when the build step comes along, which is next, we're still in the context of that extender phase, which has done generate and then applied them, and then it goes off and runs the build steps of all of the build packs that were involved. And that build pack now runs in the context of the extended builder image. But all of that happened within one container execution. Canico is that glue in the middle that did the application of the Docker files and that did the allowing of that context switch. Canico was written by a bunch of engineers at Google. There was a whole load of them when we decided to look at it at the time, and people were really quite liking Canico in the open source world because it was amazing at what it did. And then they tried to donate Canico to CNCF, and CNCF refused and said, "This is a single vendor project. We're not accepting it. Go out and build your community, get more developers, come back when it's not you trying to dump code on us, and then we can talk." So Google removed the last 3 developers from the maintainers list of Canico, so now it's unmaintained. This means that the entire concept of extensions within CNCF Buildpacks is now under threat because we've got a runway that is getting shorter every day, to which we have to start thinking about how we remove Canico because it will be unmaintained code and that will lead to security exposures. Not to mention, it ties down a dependency graph to other libraries that will also have security issues as well. If we can't update those because it'll break Canico, you can't update Canico because there isn't one. So we're starting to have discussions in upstream about how to replace Canico with a different approach. And part of that might need a significant platform change to shatter the current concept of the extender step into possibly 3 steps, which are the 3 phases that I just described conveniently. So you would have one that actually does the driving the generates that gets the Docker files. There'll be a middle one, which is apply the Docker files. And then there'll be another step, which is now run the build in the concept of the container that's been created from the image that has been extended. Yes, that's great. So it's breaking one step into 3. Now that's going to have overheads, right? Because that means we're spinning up another 2 containers for every build, which is never great. But I don't think it makes much difference in the sense of a pipeline. I mean, these things aren't quick to begin with. But the idea there is the Canico bit in the middle would become isolated to the point where we could swap it out and replace it with something else. Possible options include Builder or Build Kit, that kind of thing. Or, like if I've got an implementation of a Buildpack platform that I've written entirely in Bash. It's not very smart, but it works and it's good enough to test concepts. So in that one, the middle step would just be doing Docker builds to apply the Docker files in the right order, one after the other, and then would just do Docker run to run the new container it built. So you can see it's easy to do from a conceptual point of view if the task is broken out in a way that makes sense. And that would be my goal with that in talking with Natalie, is to try and come up with a way where when we define how that extender phase breaks down into multiple components, that the middle component is reusable and is easily implementable, because we want that to be less fragile should whichever technology we choose next be walked away from as well.
Yeah, so I'm going to say that I started a project where we were going to do multi-arch builds using BuildKit, and we did kind of a very basic proof of concept, but we didn't get anything implemented in Pack yet. We kind of have a lot of the building blocks kind of ready to implement in Pack, but if you're considering different approaches, I would consider BuildKit as one. I mean, like if we do it in one, we get it to work, then we could have kind of a consistent experience across, from using extensions in the same way that you would do regular builds. And then like once we get that implemented, I think it would be easy enough to swap it out from using BuildKit to using whatever Podman uses, Build CTL. I can't remember what it's called.
Builder, I think, under the covers will be there.
Yeah. So it's like I think the concepts would probably translate whether you're using Podman or Docker, but either way, like if we can...
Oh, almost certainly. I mean, all you're doing at the end of the day is applying a sequence of Docker files against an image.
Yeah, exactly.
Ideally without needing too much levels of permissions or, I mean, that's the kicker, right? Is how do you do this without annoying the environment that you're running in to the extent that it won't let you do it?
Yeah, I feel like, like if we use both BuildKit and Builda, they both have caching, and I feel like we can improve the caching experience.
Canico does caching as well, and extensions today, if you code them, can take advantage of that caching. With the ones that we've written, we deliberately don't, because we want to make sure that we always install the latest version of the runtime. But like with the UBI ones, I think what we output something. Can you remember what it is, Costas? There's a line in our Docker file that we generate that just outputs something like a unique UUID or something like that. No? Okay. So basically there's a point. Yeah, there's a point in our Docker files where our generated one that does the one we use to extend the builder, that there's a line in there that outputs like a UUID or something like that. And the whole point about doing that is it blows the cache out the water. Because that is different, therefore Docker can't make any assumptions that all of the steps after it didn't depend upon that differentness, and therefore there will be no caching from that point onwards. If we move that line, that UUID output, to after our installation of the JDK or the runtime node runtime, then when it ran the next time for the same build, the Canico cache will go, "Oh, I've already done those steps. Don't need to do them again."
Yeah.
So you've got that it's documented in the extension spec as this is a way to control where you blow the cache or not when you're running an extension. Because it does
Yeah.
need to be down to the extension's control. Because in our case, like we've made the conscious choice that because when we do the equivalent of RPM install Java, we're not picking, well, we're selecting Java 17, but we're not picking a subversion or a micro version or anything like that for the one that we're installing. When you do that for UBI, you will only ever get the current supported one that's there. You can't, for a UBI, you don't have the capability of selecting back through prior versions because UBI only offers you the most recent as the supported level. That's the way that the UBI platform operates. So, to that regard, then you have to say that it doesn't make sense to cache a previous layer because then that could be giving out an older JDK or an older node that we don't want to support.
I sent the
Yeah.
link on the
Yeah,
template
thanks.
that we use for the build. I
That's
don't.
it. Where we do arg build ID equals 0 run echo build ID. That's the
Okay.
cache breaker.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't. I didn't know that. Thanks for the
Yeah.
info.
So if you were to
But
move that line down by just so it was at the end of the file, for that matter, if
yes.
you put that line at the end of the file, then
Yeah.
you'll
I
notice
didn't.
that if you built the same project more than once, it won't reinstall Node. It won't re-extend the builder image every time that you do it.
But if you, for example, for testing, for example, let's say, or if you want to have some kind of caching, you can remove these two lines, right? And just have the same layers. So let me give you an example. When someone wants to run some tests locally, he can have like a flag dash dash cache, whatever. And but by removing these two lines, he can reuse the previous. I mean, that way he does not have to reinstall Node and all these packages that we installed with microdnf. So
Yep.
locally, I want to have something fast to get some feedback, and then on the CI, definitely you put that back and you test it as you should, or even for this, yeah. Um,
I mean, you can do it because you understand that this build Docker file here, although it's a template where we're inserting the things with the double angle brackets, we could have a double angle bracket there that says, cache breaker. And then you
yes,
just don't
yes,
output it from the generate phase if an
exactly.
environment variable set during the build that says that you don't want to blow the cache. And by default, then it will blow the cache. But if you pass the right flag to your generate
Yeah, yeah,
project, generate script, then it won't.
that's super easy. I mean, because we
Yeah.
construct that through the extension. So that's the interesting thing. So on the CI, you have like 10 integration tests that take 2 hours to complete, right?
Because it keeps downloading it all the time. Yeah. And the thing
Yes,
is, you have to build the same project, right? It's if you're building a different project each time, then you end up with a new
yes.
Canico cache.
Okay, yeah. So you have 10 different projects also.
Yeah.
And during this two hours period, you might end up having different modules that you test, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's possible UBI could release new node versions in the middle of your
Exactly.
test
Yes.
run.
How do we, yeah, I mean, of course, this is not something very crucial at that moment, but
So I
just
think the only way that you can
um,
resolve that is you'd have to stop using different projects, have one project that used a Java class to determine which of the subtests it was actually going to be driving. Um, You know what I mean? And then you build that project repeatedly, but passing different environment, a different environment variable to indicate which segment of the tests it needs to execute this time. If you built that project repeatedly with Buildpacks, you know what I mean? So that it's always building the same test project, then you will be able to take advantage of Canico caching for that project, especially if you disable the cache breaker that's there.
Mhm.
You could probably wipe hours off of the test suite if we do this right. It's always
Uh,
fun. I think
yeah.
that my personal record has been taking a particular app server's startup time down from 4.5 minutes to 12 seconds.
Yeah, I should have known that earlier, to be honest, because I remember developing integration tests and waiting. And anyway,
Yeah. Anyway,
but
that's what those two lines are for. It's interesting, yes, because I think some of this stuff it's in the spec, it's documented, but I'm not sure that we ever, like me and you, have ever discussed it. I know Michael's kind of aware of why it's there, but I think it's one of those things that it's been there so long that we just haven't really worried about when or if we were ever going to remove those lines. Because there
yeah,
was a
and that's
discussion way, way, way early on in all of this that we might think about removing those two or optionally moving them to after the micro DNF calls to enable faster builds. But then we came to the conclusion that it was always better to build against latest. So let's make sure that we always do that. And at least until we get a better understanding of what people are doing, or until a customer was to ask, hey, how do I make this go? Then we weren't going to touch it. Anyway, so that's the info you need there.
Thank you very much. And I have also another hot topic if you have time to discuss.
Sure.
Uh, like recently, I'm on the PR on Ubuntu Noble Images, and a thread we end up we started a discussion, and like it's not something that we didn't know, but something that came up to the surface on the builder for Ubuntu distros. The run image is always to the latest, and I don't know why uh, it's been like that. But do you know? Of course, my opinion is, without having enough context, is that we shouldn't do it because it always has the latest run image, and if something changes to the run image, then the builder will break without even noticing it. So, do you have any idea why they do that, or like, do you have any opinion? Like, should we, instead of having a floating tag, having a specific tag similar to what we do with the build image on the builder?
You can do. There's the suggestion of if you want your builds to be recreatable, you really should be using a tagged version of a builder, not
That's
latest.
another
But
issue that you
yeah,
don't have the.
you've always got this friction, right, between wanting to receive all of the relevant security updates, which is the UBI side of stuff, and wanting to have builds be 100% recreatable, which is the audit side of stuff, right? The two are not compatible. You cannot choose to automatically pick up latest security fixes if your build will always generate to the exact version that it did previously. For the UBI stack, we've chosen to, in a way, forgo some of the build pack goals and say we cannot achieve these goals on UBI because we cannot guarantee that we can recreate a build that you made previously because we can't necessarily be able to retrieve the same level of the runtime anymore. Like if you
Okay.
built this 2 years ago or a year ago, and you installed Java 11 at subversion 71, building it in 2 years' time, and you want to install Java 11, assuming Java 11's even still available, which it might not be under the UBI stuff, then we can't, it's almost certainly not going to be sub level 71. It's going to be sub level 220 by now because patches have been applied. Now, that breaks the idea of build packs being recreatable. But I think in the UBI world, we can justify that and say that's just not possible. If that is
Yeah,
important to you, what you should be doing is building your own builder and
yeah. You
downloading the
better.
RPMs and the image and keeping all of that and using it so that you refer to everything by hash, pre-packaging everything and then layering it all together. But that's not what most people want when it comes down to building an application you're going to put in production. Most people are going to want an application that is built against the latest runtime to pick up the security patches. Um, And so
But
that's the goal.
like,
That's the best we could do with the UBI ones. For Ubuntu though, they've got a little bit more because Ubuntu generally keeps past versions available for longer. And it's the same if we were ever to consider, and I'm not saying this from any product standpoint, but if we were, for instance, to do a RHEL based builder for Red Hat Enterprise, then you have access to those past versions. And you could consider that an RHEL based builder could provide that kind of build consistency. However, it's then you're paying for the contract that basically paid for those packages to be available indefinitely. So it swings and roundabouts. UBI doesn't provide that. UBI is here's what we have available today, and we will support you if you're running on it. Yeah, and I think Ubuntu is similar. I mean, Ubuntu, they've got the current version of the package and a previous couple, but they won't have every single version of every single package that's ever been released for a given version of Ubuntu.
So for for security issues, makes sense to have all the latest run image. But like if we have a check every 30 minutes or every hour, or if it should get the latest run image, then I think it's not so bad. I'm not a security expert, but instead of having a floating run image, you can have a workflow running every hour and check if there is a new run image version. Like I don't know.
Well, effectively, we're kind of doing that in Paketo anyway, because the run images that we're using for the UBI stack, for instance, are upstream, right? You imagine that we've got the Java 17 run image or the Node 18 run image, They are updated whenever they're updated. Every time a security fix is needed, a new one of those is pushed out as soon as it possibly can under latest on those ones. But we're in control of when we push out the Paketo run image. Because the Paketo run image is obviously built in response to that parent one being updated and does a push to create its version of the latest run image. So we kind of control that already to an extent, but I don't think it matters much because when you consider that if you built with our builder today, if you kept that builder, if you kept the UBI builder in your Docker daemon and then didn't update it and you built again in 6 months' time, you will still get the most recent JVM or the most recent node. I mean, even though you're running a builder image that's 6 months out of date, you'll still get the most recent JVM or node or whatever else, because when that builder image runs, it'll do a DNF install to go and get the thing.
Yes,
And that's where we differ. Because like if you've got if you have the Paketo build image that goes, from 6 months ago, it's going to download the runtime that it has a link for in its metadata. And that will always be a specific version of, for instance, the Bellsoft Liberica JDK at version 17 sub revision 73. It'll go and get that one because that's the one its metadata told it to get, and it will always get that one. Right up until the point where it can't get that one because the hosting no longer offers it anymore, and then you're kind of equally stuck because you can't recreate your build anymore because you don't have the dependencies that the build was downloading dynamically when it ran the first time. But this is the thing, this is why I was saying that I think that a lot of people look at Buildpacks and think this has taken care of all of my concerns for me, and actually it hasn't. It's just hidden a lot of them, Recreatable builds are only doable if you're willing to indefinitely host all of the dependencies of the build yourself or package them inside your builder. At which point you're better off creating your own builder image and running with that than using anything that claims that it will go and get stuff for you. Yeah.
No, I think it makes sense why they have the latest image. Okay.
Yeah, like if you imagine you built a UBI builder image today, like say you want to keep building Node apps using, I don't know, Node 18 or something, yeah, you could build yourself a builder image that has Node 18 pre-installed and doesn't have the extension to install Node, or just has a dummy no-op extension that says, I've installed Node, and it didn't, it was pre-packaged. Then you will always have the same version of Node when you build things. You would have to customize it to talk about referring to a different run image, which will be the copy of the run image that you took at that point in time and embedded, and now your extension will return and swap the run image to, run image with char hash blah 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 as part of its reference. Then you've got a completely recreatable build using a framework that's very close to what we already have. But now it's up to you to look after that run image and up to you to look after that builder image that you've created because it's important to you. You wanted to be able to have this 100% recreated, so now you've got to look after those files.
Okay. Things make sense. I know, I think. Thank you.
I wish in a way that we could freeze the extended builder image. That would be nice, And maybe one of the things we could look at as a result of the Kaneko discussion is that maybe there's scope to publish the extended builder image with some sort of tag that allows you to know this was the one that was used for this build,
I see, yeah. So
Because
you
then
yeah.
then you can always recreate the build because when you run with the extended builder image, of course, it will never run extensions. It will just run the build packs in the scope of that. And providing the build packs aren't downloading dependencies, which they do, then you'd have a recreatable build. But as I know that Paketo's got the capability of like redirecting all of its dependency stuff to a mirror that you host locally, where you can keep these things indefinitely as well. But again, it's getting builds to be both secure and recreatable are very opposite direction goals, If you want it to be recreatable, then you're recreating it with those security holes in it every single time.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, definitely you could have like an instance of the build image, and with the extension, for example, you can pass it as an argument, and instead of running the Docker file, just put this,
Yeah.
and that's it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a nice idea. But
Yeah, I mean, like if you imagine that if Kaneko becomes if the apply Docker files and return me the name of the image that you applied them to, the image that now has them applied, if that becomes an API call type within the process, then you could simply check and see if that image has already been built. And if
yeah,
it has, you
you
could
don't have to
make
build
the
it.
choice to use it. And if it hasn't, you go and generate it. And then, but that's a caching decision that's at a per image level, not even giving the extensions the option as to whether they want to do it. Because don't forget, in our world, we're only ever running one extension, but the goal of extensions is you could have lots. I mean,
Yeah.
the easiest way to kind of mentally wrap your head around that is imagine what happens if one day we try to figure out how to build a project that has Node and Java. So we'll want both the extensions to run. Yeah. Now there's a problem there today because immediately the run image isn't going to work anymore because whichever one wins, we'll either end up with a Node image or a Java image to run on, which isn't going to help.
Yeah,
But
that's a bit complex.
there's
Yeah,
ways around this. There are ways around this, and the ways around it is to say that if I'm not the only extension in play, then perhaps we need to do run image extension.
If we don't, sorry,
If we were to figure out that we weren't the only run image, like I don't know if it's possible for an extension to query if another extension has already extended the run image or has already switched the run image. Yeah, but once that sort of thought comes into mind, then one extension can say, I want to switch the run image. And the next one can turn around and say, well, I need to now extend that run image because I can't switch because a switch has already occurred. And then you're into the games of extending somebody else's image, which is even more amusing. So let's not go there just yet. There are big problems with this thought line.
and then you can also use the dash dash run image flag from the pack CLI and make things even
I mean,
worse.
I guess the other thing is you could check the build plan whilst you're running in your extension. You could check the build plan. And if there's more than one extension selected to run, then you don't do run image switching
Mm.
because you know you're not the only player in town. And the only safe choice at that point is run image extension, not run image switching. That would work. That would be quite easy to do as well. Oh, well. Anyone have any other discussion topics they want to bring up?
No, I learned a lot from all of this discussion. what was I going to say? So is this kind of the extent of the maintainers these days? We just basically lost everybody from Broadcom.
We haven't lost all of them. I know Daniel's still involved. And I know there's a few others, but yeah,
Forest is gone.
Forrest's gone. I know Sophie's been gone for forever, hasn't she? So
Yes, so almost 1 year ago.
yeah.
Okay.
So this is one of these things from a Paketo standpoint. I know it's basically Michael and Costas are now owning the node stack, give or take, because there's nobody else left on that. From a Java perspective, I know Daniel's still heavily involved, which is great because Daniel does way more than just look after the Java stack. He also looks after a lot of the libraries that enable the Java stack and also looks after a lot of the other bits and pieces like the CNB, the upstream Go library that abstracts Buildpacks. He's one of the committers to that as well. So Daniel's really important. So it's good that he's still around. But otherwise, when we're looking on the channel at the moment to see who's active, I see Forrest is active, but he's not really paid to work on it anymore, so he's not attending any of the meetings and stuff. Daniel's there, and then we've got Jan is there. I don't know if Jan's still involved. I think he was. I think we saw him on a meeting a while back. Yeah,
Yeah,
he was. He was in the last one in February.
yeah.
But he's SAP, so that's another non-Broadcom. Scott Frederick's shown as active in the channel, but I know he's not even working for Spring anymore. So, because he was the original author of the Spring Boot plugin, and that doesn't happen. The Sophie's not on, and then there's me. That's all the ones I see in my direct message like list of people I've talked to regularly.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be joining these calls as often as possible
That
because
helps.
I'm also a maintainer now to help support all this stuff.
What are you maintaining? Which parts of Paketo are you maintaining?
Uh, all the stuff that Costa's working on, Go, Java, Python.
Okay, so just generic, really, because they used to have like the concept of a stacks maintainer and a infrastructure maintainer. Or well, I think with the number of people they've lost, I don't think we can maintain those kind of separations anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I was added to all of those separate stack things that you're talking about,
Yeah,
but not every single one. Like I didn't get added to Node.js because it's not really my area of expertise, and there's still activity going on there, and I don't think it's really necessary to have my help anyway.
yeah, exactly. I mean, Costas and Michael know what they're doing. They still appreciate the help whenever they get to a point where
Yeah,
it's useful. I think in order to try and prevent it becoming like our one vendor thing. Like
yeah,
you don't really want Node to become Node brackets Red Hat, but I mean it's not at this stage. But you could see that if all of the people that are working on it on that line are all Red Hat, then you risk falling into that kind of line of thought. So it's worth making sure we got people. Java
yeah,
is healthy, I think, because there's still a lot of people interested in it and still using it. From what I hear, a lot of the other runtimes are now lacking any maintainers at all for things like PHP, Ruby, Python. Some of those are now potentially going to have to thing. And I think it's one of those ones that, given that we're looking at the meetings notes here, and I'm seeing that this one has got us three. The one at the beginning of April, nobody put any meeting notes in, so I assume that didn't happen just because nobody turned up. The one before that, it's Red Hat and yourself. The one before that, it's Red Hat entirely. The one before that, it's Red Hat. Well, it's only two of us. And then we're back. You just have to look back. This project, the people who are turning up for the working group at least, has drastically fallen. It used to be like, 5, 10, 12 people. We're now regularly struggling to get enough people to be able to make decisions.
yeah. I used to join this more regularly, but I always have a conflict during these
Yeah.
meetings. So I've been prioritizing other stuff, unfortunately. But so what
Same.
one thing I've chatted with Daniel a lot. I often will just ping Daniel when I have questions and then start the
Yeah.
discussion in the community. I'm sure a lot of people do this too. But uh, it's come up repeatedly that like we were maintaining two different libraries to build packs. And you've got Packet, Libpack. Like
Yep.
I think historically, there's probably very little interest in like merging these two things. But it seems to me like we want to have a healthy project. We probably just need to merge these two things. And even if we're
Yeah.
just lifting and shifting stuff that Jam does and put in another one or whatever, even if we're just doing the lifting and shifting. Is everybody generally in favor of that?
To merge the build systems. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, I'm probably more in the Octo camp than I am in the Jam camp because I've had to write code to modify that one, and I think that project had a lot more scope to what it does. But I also admit that it's also untested in some of the artifact types. So yes, there's a discussion to have as to, I'm totally for collapsing it into one solution. I'm just not sure which of the solutions should win. However, I also think that there's no longer enough people to argue that either solution should be the one that must win anymore. So we can probably have a fairer discussion on merits now and figure out which way to go. Because the reason you end up with two in the first place is, of course, because somebody says, I'm not going to use that because I don't think it does the thing that my one does as well as that one. If those people aren't here anymore, now you can start choosing which one is going to win.
Yeah. Well, I think that's not that we don't want those people to be not around, but
No.
sometimes, you've got too much, you've invested a lot of time and energy into it, and, it's just hard to see your work change.
It's just 1 week when we managed to get like maybe 4 different companies on here all at the same time. We should take a vote on which part of Paketo we don't want anymore and then just eject it.
Were you going to say something, Costas?
Yeah, like for the stacks, we pretty much we're gonna have a common solution for the builders too. For the build packs, I guess we are talking about,
Yeah.
right? Even if we have a winner, then who's gonna implement that and spend that much time to merge or reconcile these two solutions, two different implementations? It's like, for me, that's the most and I'm saying that because also in Paketo Buildpacks, it's not always the matter of creating a pull request. It's also in getting people involved in reviewing it and landing it in a timely manner, because we don't have a lot of people to do that, right?
I think the big problem with having a small community is the advantage of Buildpacks is that you are delegating aspects of your build to SMEs, to people who know what they're doing, to people who cared about the way these types of projects will be built. If we don't have those skills as part of Paketo anymore, and if they're not willing to participate in, meetings on a regular basis, then you cannot claim to still be representing that level of expertise to an end user. Because, you've got an end user who's trusting that you are building this thing according to the best knowledge there is for that platform, for Node, for Java, for Python, for Ruby. And honestly, if we don't have Python developers turning up here and looking after it, we can't make that assertion anymore. So at best, that stuff needs to become deprecated or marked as some way where the user knows that although this thing will probably still build their app anymore, we're not sure if it's the best way to build the app anymore because we've got nobody left to ask.
Yeah. That's how I got involved in this community in the first place, because I was building Python apps, but I don't even build Python apps that much. I mean, I do, but I'm not even really aware of the Python ecosystem and like the way it's evolving, because I just don't keep up with it as much. So anyhow, okay. Well, I just was kind of getting a general sense of like if people are on board with merging things together, consolidating, moving to kind of like a single code base to support everything eventually.
Yeah.
And also we are in a transition period that we try to also support multi-arc. And for example, from our side on the build packs, we haven't fully finished it yet. So maybe might take much more time, but if we first have 2 implementations and we know exactly what we want after 1 year, maybe it's been easier for us to merge if this kind of scenario ever going to happen. So pretty much still we are in a good direction That's
Yeah.
part of
I
the
was
implementation.
thinking, smaller team, we've got to reduce the overheads. We've got to bring down the amount of stuff that we're attempting to do, scale back the vision slightly, but also focus better on what we're still able to deliver. That sounds like all corporate speak. I went all managery there for a minute. That's not good.
It comes
But
out.
you know
You
what I
can't
mean?
control.
It's if we've only got the few of us turning up to these meetings every month, we have to start deciding whether or not we are now the future of Paketo. Is it the question? Is it the case that there are still a silent majority of people who are just not attending the working groups? Which I think it is. I think there's still a good number of developers who are just not able to attend here every week. But if we don't get some sort of quorum where we can discuss stuff and raise it, then you can't advance it. That's the problem.
Yeah. One thing that we really take advantage of, I know we're out of time, so I'll just say this quickly,
Yeah.
is like the ability to rebase. And like you've done a lot of work with extensions. So can you not rebase if you use extensions?
So extensions, you set a flag during your extension that says whether or not rebasing is still allowed after you've run your extension. In our case, we don't set that flag, so the rebasing is denied.
Okay. So like if you were to do something in a way where rebasing would be fine, like
So
you're
actually, I think, or is it the question that ours is? I forget which way around it is. Ours is one case where rebasing should work because we're doing run image switching, not run image extension. If you do run image extension, then you get to say where the cutoff is, which layers, after which layer the rebase will happen or not, you know?
right. But the trick is when you go to rebase, you have to make sure
Yeah.
that the repo you're pulling from has the rebase, has the extension applied run image.
Exactly, yeah.
Also. Yeah,
So
yeah.
in our case, when we're doing run image switching, like we've got an extension that does Node, an extension that does Java, and we have a forest of run images that is Node and Java at each version that we want. And thankfully, these are
You publish those repeatedly.
yeah, and Red Hat was publishing those as part of the UBI program on a regular basis. They update, a Java 17 run image, they update a Java 17 JDK image, they update a Node blah blah image, and then all of these different versions. Every time there's a security update, a new version of that image is pushed out. The work that Costa's done is the part that monitors those and pulls it and republishes it as a Paketo run image. So it gains the run layers, which means that if we needed to rebase, we totally can, because the only thing we're swapping out underneath is the complete runtime and run image, which is what we put the code on top of in the first place. When you start doing run image extension, that becomes more of an issue because, as you say, you can only rebase successfully if the thing you're rebasing to already has all the things that the run image extension added, that your
Yeah.
app depended upon, in brackets. That's an
I'm
important one.
I'm gonna have to play with this because like we do some builds where we do some customization on the run image, but
Hmm.
they're not rebasable basically. Um, okay, cool. I actually have to drop for another meeting, but
Yeah.
great discussion, and I will be joining more of these calls as often.
Excellent. All right, then. Take care, all, and we'll see you at the next one.
All right, sounds good.
See ya.